One second. Let me start this. This is the only way we can start any segment on the Ayatollah is me reading the Ayatollah's best tweets on my second monitor here. Let me just read these to you. I'm not into cinema and visual arts, but when it comes to poetry and novels, I'm not just a typical audience. Hashtag books. Hashtag avid reader. The Ayatollah is not like other girls. You can't leave all your tasks to your wife and then criticize her, even if she's a scientist/politician. Yet when interacting within the family, she's a hashtag flower. Anyway, I could go through these all day. Once, I mean, you know, these are beautiful tweets. I think he should have, you know, maybe more had the lifestyle of like a Farsi poet, you know, in the mountains, you know, dropping his wisdom upon the people. But no, instead, he's an extremely high-ranking political and religious official. And so we have to listen to him, not for his fantastic book advice, but instead for the possibility of further missile attacks on American bases, on Israel, or his pathway towards an atomic weapon. Let's start with the Ayatollah's words, say where we are now, how Iran's doing, and what Trump says about the Ayatollah's recent statements, because I highly suspect that this is not the end.
The U.S. president said that Iran should surrender. That means there's no more enrichment. It's the question of Iran to be surrendered. To mention the word Iran is too much for the mouth of the U.S. president to even pronounce it, to say it. A great Iran and the word of surrender, they don't match. They don't match with each other. It's a joke. It's a ridiculous thing to say. I would like to congratulate the great nation of Iran. I want to congratulate them for a few reasons. First, I would like to congratulate them for victory over the fake regime of the Zionist regime. With all those claims that the Zionist regime were making, they almost were crushed under the blows of the Islamic government.
All right,
Okay, I don't need to hear CNN's spin on it. I just heard the Ayatollah himself, so you know I don't need any spin. Okay, so what do I have to say about what Mr. Ayatollah said? So first off, Ayatollah's alive. Now, I know that's not a particularly high bar, but when the the head commander of the IRGC's missile and drone force, which is obviously a big tool against the Israelis that Iran has, when that guy got killed, and with so many high-ranking atomic scientists, a lot of old guard, you know, there's IRGC guys that are known guys, but they're not exactly on the ground guys anymore. And with the IRGC being a largely flat and fraternal organization, you know, taking out the older guard might not necessarily have as much effect as if they were taking out the old guard of, say, the Artesh or like those high-ranking commanders. But at the end of the day, a lot of people with the know-how on the ground when it comes to the missile and drone forces, they were taken out. A lot of high-ranking people in this fraternal organization were taken out, which of course blows for anybody in that organization to have your buddies get blown up. And of course, the air defense systems being, you know, kicked in pretty hard. There was a legitimate question as to when are the Iranians going to show the supreme leader, because the supreme leader's life could be in danger. The president of the United States openly floated assassinating the supreme leader of Iran. The Israelis have openly indicated through like Rising Lion of Zion and different indications of just their open posturing that they would be very comfortable with regime change in Iran and the striking of certain police station and other places, while not nearly enough to start any movement on the ground, at least shows some indication of wanting to take out the law enforcement apparatus, the arms of the state, the power of the state on the ground, or at least indicating that they have the ability to do so now that the Iranians don't have complete control over their skies, to put it very, very generously to the Iranians. And so there is a certain usefulness to just show the Ayatollah, show he's still alive, when they've probably had this guy shifting from safe house to safe house in order to stop him from exploding and becoming a headline. And they're going to have to move on to the third supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution, because this is only the second one after the founding. So I think that that's one statement you could take from this, is that he's not dead, and this is not a deep fake. But as for everything else he said, I think a lot of it is domestic posturing. Some of it needs to, it's hard to exactly differentiate where the posturing towards the United States and where the posturing towards their own people, and where that overlaps, exactly where that starts and ends. Because a lot of this was chest beating along the lines of, like he said, we were that close. It shows that we have the ability to, really crush and obliterate the Israelis. We achieve our objectives. We were able to defend Iran. Iran stood steady. But over the last 600 days, Iran has not lost more in its power base for more than, I don't know, since the Islamic Revolution. They lost Hezbollah's position of strength in southern Lebanon. They lost an ally and a transitionary station for equipment to Hezbollah in the Assad regime, which Hezbollah broke their teeth on trying to defend in the decade that preceded it. Their militias in Iraq, while still existent and still kicking around, Kataib Hezbollah is still around. The PMF is not a kaput organization. They have not really done much in compared to previous years in trying to apply pressure on the United States post the strikes on Iran. That pressure came directly from the Iranians, like the strikes on American bases after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. The Houthis, they're still there. So that's something that has largely remained unmoved, despite efforts by the Trump administration really to bomb them and bomb them and bomb them. Point is, though, this axis of resistance that the Iranians have built up across the Middle East is in the worst position it has been in decades. Hezbollah is weakened. Assad is gone. The Iraqi militias have yet to act in strong action in protection of the Islamic Revolution, and the Houthis are about where they were. So they've lost a lot of influence in a short period of time. That's not even to talk about the problems with them defending their own airspace, or the recent strikes on the atomic weapons program and their nuclear program, which at the very least, even in the most pessimistic intelligence assessments from, preliminary assessments, that very well could be wrong. And we're hearing more, speak from Capitol Hill that it might be that the program was set back years, not months. But in the most pessimistic outlook for Washington, months. And the best outlook for Tehran, months. And that's still a decent amount of time. And that's still a lot of damage to be done to a program that's probably quite expensive for a state placed under sanctions. So the Iranians can't protect their airspace. They can't protect the majority of their proxies. The majority of their proxies are either being overthrown or weakened, or they're the one that is acting on their behalf, the Houthis, are not in a state of growing power. And not to mention, one of their main ways of applying pressure on the West when it comes to, hijacking civilian merchant vessels through a major shipping lane is something that could also get on the nerves of Iran's allies like China, who they're heavily reliant on for their energy export. So Iran, over the last 600 days, has been in a much weaker position. And the idea that they are anywhere near to a position to have been close to obliterating the Israelis, you could just say that this is all chest banging to position for the public. But if we were to take the idea that this is something that the Iranians could believe on any point, or believe that before they, engaged in many of the operations they did on October 7th and past October 7th, whether they thought that they were somewhere close to that. Let me just be clear. Whether or not the Iranians believe that the Israelis don't have deep roots in Tel Aviv, don't have deep roots in that land, the Israelis disagree. And that disagreement has been shown through the decimation of Hamas. The disagreement has been shown through the decimation of Hezbollah. One of their other proxies, Assad, has been overthrown. And even though that's bad for the Iranians, the Israelis then bombed the Syrians anyway, out of fear of what comes after the Assad regime. And the Israelis have shown themselves sufficient in intercepting the Houthi missiles that have been launched at their country, and in the blow-for-blow air war that Israel engaged in with the Iranians, while the Israelis had civilian infrastructure struck, had military infrastructure struck, had civilian hospitals struck, and vice versa. At the end of the day, the Iranians were the ones that most clearly showed an inability to defend their airspace and showed them losing their long-range air defense systems like S-300 launchers and S-300 radar. And when the Israelis finally agreed to the ceasefire and the Iranians agreed to the ceasefire and it had that rocky start, the last thing the Israelis blew up was an Iranian S-300 radar, as if to tell the Iranians directly, we got you. We can still get you. So the Iranians are in an extremely difficult position here. And you don't need to have any sort of political leading domestically in the United States or regionally in the Middle East to see that. I think part of the reason why Iraqi militias have been so hesitant to immediately jump to the Islamic Revolution's defense is because they also see the writing on the wall. So the Iranians, for as much chest beating as they want to do, for as much of a signal of strength they want to send to the domestic population, they are in an extremely difficult position, foreign policy-wise. Now, whether that extends domestically, as many in Israel has hoped that it would do, and some in the United States has hoped that it would do, and some in the Iranian diaspora has hoped that it would do, that is not particularly clear. And what I'm most fearful of in the immediate future for inside Tehran, for inside beautiful cities like Isfahan, for inside all of Iran and the 92 million people in it, is government crackdowns. The Artesh is not showing, which is Iran's army, is not showing any signs of disloyalty. The IRGC is still a very powerful organization deemed with protecting the Islamic Revolution, quote unquote. And they have their influence within basically every sector of society. I don't see any real breaking apart of the hold on the centers of power, whether it be electricity production, whether it be fuel, whether it be government buildings, or any sort of tax collection. Of everything is still controlled by the government solidly. And what I have seen since the cessation of hostilities for possibly a short period, for maybe a longer period, between Israel and Iran is a crackdown. According to the Iranian government, over 700 people have been arrested on suspicion of spying. 700 people. 2 have already been executed for spying for Israel. Now, of those 700 people arresting for spying, how many of those people are spies, and how many of those people are people that the Iranian government rounded up because A, they want to show the appearance of being able to deal with the fact that the Israelis have just infiltrated so deep into Iran itself, and to the point where the Mossad was releasing footage of their agents operating within Iranian territory, or if it isn't with, showing the perception of dealing with this and it's some arrests associated with that, the dual use of also being able to crack down on the government's opponents, as well as maybe arrest some illegitimate spies. But something I'm very, very fearful of is the arrest of journalists, is the arrest of people, as we're hearing reports of, for social media activity. As if a Mossad agent would go on social media and start tweeting out, hey, look at this bombing that just occurred, XYZ. I'm tweeting this out as if to inform the entire public of my actions. It's more likely that this is not only being used as a moment to try to find the spies and deal with the deep infiltration in society, but also to send a message to the Iranian public about who's in control, who controls the streets, and crack down on the opponents of the Ayatollah, the opponents of the regime, critics of the regime, and those that they would say could be potential flashpoints for tension in Iranian society if critics started to, get a little loud about the fact that the Iranian people have spent so much tax dollars and spent so much time under a sanctions regime fighting against Israel in the Middle East, only to have the lion's share of those efforts unwinded within 600 days. And then all those deterrence networks meant to not only put pressure on the Israelis, but defend the Iranians from, direct attack, has ended with the Iranians being put under direct attack by both the Israeli Air Force and its atomic program by the American Air Force and its B-2 30,000-pound bombs, B-2 bomber bombs. So, to put it lightly, the Islamic Revolution is not in the strongest geopolitical position across the region it has ever been. It's in a quite difficult position. So I would lean towards a lot of this being signaling towards the domestic audience. But I will say that a lot of the signals that has been sent from Tehran has also been towards the continuation of their right to enrichment. The idea that they can enrich possibly past the 3% civilian threshold. That's the threshold of enrichment, the 3% threshold that stops at civilian enrichment. Things past that are really only for military enrichment, and the Iranians have been going past 60% enrichment. They want to retain the right to enrich, whether or not they openly admit towards pursuing an atomic weapons program, whereas right now what we're hearing is one of the proposed ideas is Iran being able to keep its civilian atomic weapons program. That was something that I was worried that American negotiators were not going to be willing to back off on. And if they were not willing to back off on that, it would put the Iranian government in a very difficult position when it comes to saving face or trying to somehow make this massive investment into an atomic program pay back the Iranian people in any way, as well as just the fact that the Iranian people want better economic investments. They want a better economy. They want a stronger economy. So the not allowing them in a civilian atomic program, I think, would be a speed bump that could really potentially derail negotiations and make the Iranians think, well, we can't negotiate with the United States. They bomb us. They make nuclear deals with us. They tear them up. Then the Israelis bomb us. The Americans bomb us. All the rest of our deterrents in the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, our proxies across the region, it did not work. So we need an ultimate deterrent. And I'm positive that hardliners within Iran right now are arguing very aggressively to those in positions of power that the move should be speed running the atomic weapons program, not delaying it. Whether or not it's gotten delayed by months, years, or otherwise, they need to pursue it more than ever, because this shows that negotiating with the United States is a fool's errand, and that our other possible avenues for deterrence, i.e., threatening Israel with a rain of missiles from southern Lebanon, is no longer an option. So we need something to counterbalance. And I think that argument for many people in Tehran is going to be quite convincing. So I think this is partially domestic signaling. I think it's partially that whether or not they want to continue to pursue it, even if they were going to give it up, they want to be able to maintain that leverage, because the signals that are being released by the Trump administration right now is that a deal with the Iranians might not, could not be necessary. That, according to Trump, the program was obliterated. So whether or not they have a deal doesn't really matter all that much, but it matters a lot. It matters a whole lot, because we have not gotten confirmation that the enriched material, the tons and tons of enriched material that the Iranians had been working with was destroyed in the strikes. We don't know if all of their centrifuges were destroyed, or if some were damaged, or if some were destroyed, or if they were all destroyed, but I've heard no word about them all being destroyed. And we don't know about the other facilities that we did not target the underground locations of, because we did not destroy all of the facilities that were working on this program in Iran. And just because Fordo might have their tunnels collapsed in on does not mean that all of the intelligence, all of the experience that has been built up through a long time of working towards this program has been lost overnight. And so the real only way to guarantee that the Iranians don't get an atomic weapon is regime change towards a government that would be more considerate towards not attaining one, and we are nowhere close to regime change. We don't see any real movements towards that, and right now it just doesn't seem like something that's going to happen in the short term. But of course, these things can change depending on the Iranians taking a misstep, repressing their people too much. They have a very young society, but as of right now, that doesn't look like the case. Or if that doesn't happen, the Iranian people overthrowing the government, then a ground invasion. And right now, there is no appetite in Washington, whether it be amongst J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, or probably even Trump himself, for a ground invasion in one of the most mountainous countries in the world, with a population of 92 million people, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the Artesh and in the IRGC, many more fighters. Look, it's just not something that I think that American military planners really want to consider all too much. And it's not something that its political leaders want to consider. And it's not like the Israelis are going to be able to get the reservists to march across the desert into Tehran and overthrow the government right now. I just don't think that's feasible. So where does that leave us? That leaves us with having the Iranians limit the program themselves, self-policing, monitored by a third-party organization like the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's what that leaves us with. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to maintain the right to enrich within their own borders, or according to what I'm hearing, they're getting pressured to, if they want to keep a civilian program, enrich outside of their borders, we'll have to wait and see. But there's going to need to be a deal. And what I was worried about from the way that J.D. Vance was talking, from the way that Donald Trump was talking, from the way that they were talking about the program itself being obliterated, not just a single centrifuge, not just a single facility, not even the enriched material, which we still don't know the status of, but they say that it was obliterated. I find that hard to believe. I find that not likely. And I think that there was certainly elements of the program that probably did exist that would allow them to continue to pursue it if they wished to, even if it did mean kicking the can down the road, and that their country is so infiltrated by intelligence assets that they probably wouldn't be able to hide it. And maybe that would mean another question of bombing in a few years. But again, not an end to the issue without a sort of Iran deal 2.0. Let me read you what Donald Trump put forward as he's positioning his diplomatic position on future talks with the Iranians, which are scheduled to begin soon, rumored to begin soon. Why would the so-called supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of the war-torn country of Iran, say so blatantly and foolishly that he won the war with Israel when he knows his statement is a lie? It is not so. As a man of great faith, he is not supposed to lie. Well, Donald Trump, another man of great faith, would know. His country was decimated. His 3 evil nuclear sites were obliterated. And I knew exactly where he was sheltered, and would not let Israel or the U.S. Armed Forces, by far the greatest and most powerful in the world, terminate his life. I saved him from a very ugly and ignominious death, and he does not have to say, "Thank you, Mr. President Trump." In fact, in the final act of the war, I demanded Israel bring back a very large group of planes, which were headed directly to Tehran, looking for a big day, perhaps the final knockout. Tremendous damage would have ensued, and many Iranians would have been killed. It was going to be the biggest attack of the war by far. During the last few days, I was working on the possible removal of sanctions and other things, which would have given a much better chance to Iran at a full and fast and complete recovery. The sanctions are biting. But no, instead I get hit with a statement of anger, hatred, and disgust, and immediately dropped all work on sanction relief and more. So Trump is saying he's dropping work on sanctions relief to Iran because of the public statement of the Ayatollah that they quote unquote won the war with Israel. Iran has to work into the world order flow, or things will only get worse for them. How do you think the reaction would be to this if it was Biden or Obama talking about the need for countries to join the world order? I mean, I hear all them say the rules-based system, which doesn't really ring the bell in the same way to conspiracy theorists, but world order. My goodness. They are always so angry, hostile, and unhappy. And look at what it has gotten them: a burned out, blown up country with no future, a decimated military, a horrible economy, and death all around them. They have no hope, and it will only get worse. I wish the leadership of Iran would realize that you often get more with honey than you do with vinegar. Peace. With exclamation points. Three, in fact, to let you know that he is serious. Okay, so I would say the biggest.
Burns is
There's a lot you could take from this,
morally corrupt,
but I don't feel like breaking down exactly every interesting part of this. I'm sure if you guys wanted to go back and read it back, or I'm sure there was certain moments of that really stood with you. Thank you, Cunning Dingo, for the primer. I appreciate that. But the big thing that stood out to me is him basically saying that, A, you said you beat the Israelis. How dare you? I'm going to, hold back on sanctions relief, which is, of course, one of the things that the Iranians want in return for the United States, accepting that they got rid of the Iranian nuclear program. They get rid of the program. America gets rid of the sanctions. It's like a yin yang thing. So him saying that he's going to give that up because of the statement, I don't think this is something that he would necessarily be so hard. Oh my gosh, this statement. I think it's more of a signal of his willingness to continue the sanctions regime on Iran, and he's diplomatically signaling that. But the other big thing here is his constant signaling towards, I could have killed him. I could have taken out the Ayatollah. I could have taken out the supreme leader. I knew where he was. But I stopped not only did I not do it, but I also told the Israelis they couldn't do it. Treating the Israelis kind of like not like necessarily an attack dog, but in the image of an attack dog that he's holding back on a leash from killing the only second leader of the Islamic Revolution since its inception. So it's a point at the willingness to allow sanctions to continue and their ability to kill the supreme leader. That's what I think are the two biggest things that can take away from this. The other big thing I could take from Trump's response, which was not inside the statement but was in a press conference, was Trump, when he was asked if he would consider bombing Iran's facilities again if Iran was enriching uranium to a level that concerned the U.S. For example, something past 60%, 70%, something that was getting close to the 90% enrichment that would be necessary to weaponize an atomic device before getting some other device to carry it as a payload, hit Tel Aviv, reach somewhere in the continental United States or elsewhere. Donald Trump responded because there was a real question mark about Donald Trump's stomach for another military operation post all of this backlash from inside of his own party, the fact that he leaned so heavily into him being a peace candidate and campaigning so hard against the wars in the Middle East. I still remember the 2015 Republican primary and Donald Trump going after Jeb Bush and his family for how they responded to 9/11 and the wars that followed, and even going after them for not protecting America on 9/11, which was reacted to with much shock and horror from within the party, but was very quickly forgotten about. Well, anyway, Donald Trump responded to the possibility of further bombing runs on Iran by saying, sure, without question, absolutely, he would bomb Tehran if they were found to be enriching uranium again to a level that concerned the United States. So this seems to be an open indication from the United States of not only, hey, we're bluffing or otherwise saying we could have taken out your supreme leader. We told Israel to not go harder and bomb you even harder at the end of this. Even though we did bomb your nuclear facilities with our big B-2 planes, something that the Israelis don't have, but we have the capacity to bring more weapons to back them up. We have the ability to also come back and continue to bomb your program if you proceed with it anyway, despite our offer of a deal. A deal we don't know all the details of, but supposedly would include, again, Iran losing the ability to enrich uranium, losing that, what the United States are calling a privilege, and handing that ability over to other countries who would enrich uranium for them for their civilian nuclear program. Basically meaning that they would not have the machinery and the material to go past 3% enrichment if they so chose 3, 4, 5 years down the line after the deal that they would pursue with an atomic device anyway, despite the deal. Basically, it is the United States saying, fine, if you want to keep a civilian atomic program, which the Iranians have always been very steadfast about. They've also been steadfast about their right to enrich. Now the Americans are basically causing this dilemma. You either accept the deal, or you deal with the possibility of us bombing you again if you try to pursue it again, and us probably backing up the Israelis in an air campaign against you. After the Israelis have shown their ability to penetrate your air defense systems and deep within your country when it comes to their intelligence assets and their sabotage assets. It's quite a difficult position for the Iranians to be in. That's not to say that the Iranians don't have any cards up their sleeve. If they so choose, they could try to, blockade the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC still has the ability to, do mine lane capabilities in the coastline near Iran. The Artesh Navy still has the ability to try to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. The United States could respond militarily to that, but of course, a military response to a blockade like that, which could wreak havoc on energy markets and directly go against Donald Trump's promise to lower energy prices, as well as being a safe haven for the Russians for energy price increases that will benefit their sales to both the Indians and the Chinese, which they're currently having to sell energy at a discount. That could be responded to with force by the United States. Those ships could be blown up. And then we could follow that up with more strikes on Tehran, more strikes on Isfahan, and then that could be responded to with possibly more strikes on American assets through the region. So, yes, the Iranians still have tools in their tool belt. They could still blockade the Strait of Hormuz. They could try to, if they could have any success in trying to convince them, try to get Iranian backed militias in Iraq to try to take part in some attacks on American bases in the country. That's still probably where American assets are most vulnerable. And they, of course, could try to get the Houthis to do more activities on the Black Sea. I don't think they're going to get Hezbollah to do anything right now. So I think de facto, due to the state of Hezbollah, we should assume that they don't have much potential right now to act as one of the axes on the axis of resistance that the Iranians have made. So there are tools left in the tool belt of the Iranians. But to be completely honest with you, if the Iraqi militias start attacking American bases, America will bomb those militias with force harder than those militias have attacked the American bases. And so those militias have a disincentive to get involved with this. They will look to what happened to Hezbollah. They will look to the support Assad got when everything hit the fan. And they will look to what the Americans are willing to do to bomb an American atomic facility, which the Iranians might have predicted they did not have the goal to do, and decide, I think I'd rather preserve the lives of our ammunition storage facilities and our men. I'd rather preserve the status of our ammunition storage and our men. The Houthis, I think, might continue to strike out, but again, this all comes with hitches. This all comes with the risk of further escalating and then getting clapped back, or with their proxies deciding that, at this point, the stakes are too high and the leverage against them, the physical leverage against them, too immense for them to participate in these operations to back up the Iranians. And when at the end of this whole, if they do pursue continued, nuclear programs, they could face bombs anyway. So there is a lot of incentives for the Iranians to come to the table and negotiate. And if they don't and they pursue the program, we also need to say that the closer they get to a bomb, the closer you get to, hey, even if they did get to the bomb, if they somehow cross the finish line, there's still the possibility that Israel will strike anyway, but now try to strike the facilities where they think those bombs are. And considering how deep Israeli intelligence has penetrated into Iran, hell, they might actually hit it right. And then you have the risk of these atomic devices going off inside of Iran. So there's a lot of disincentives working against the Iranians for steaming ahead with the atomic weapons program, not only cost of repairs and the bigger timeline that's been placed upon it, but the fact that on every escalation ladder that they can look at, outside of really dragging the United States directly into a ground war in Iran that it seems pretty set on not doing, the Iranians don't have that much capacity to escalate in a way where they have the advantage. In a ground war in Iran where they're fighting the Artesh, fighting Iranian artillery systems, maybe the dynamic would be different depending on how the United States preps that operation, our forces being on the ground, obviously the hostile geography of the country, but that's not happening. The Trump administration has no interest in that, and the Israelis cannot do that without the United States. So what the Iranians are instead facing is continued tough sanctions, a strategic ally in Russia that is not willing to back them up with replenishments for their air defense systems because they've got their own problems, and not only continuing sanctions and no backup from the Russians, but the possibility of the whole program getting blown up at the end anyway. And with the possibility of Israel returning to doing strikes across the country after the Ayatollah had just said that they won. And if you say you win, and then a month later, you have apartment blocks going up in smoke, or artillery systems, or air defense systems, or more airfields, well, that's not going to look very good for either your foreign policy position or the strength that you're projecting to your domestic public, which is something that the Iranian regime cares a whole lot about. Point is, Iran's in a very difficult state, and it might serve them well to find a way to accept some sort of at least a temporary deal to get out of this position, even if they wanted to pursue a program down the line. Whether it would be agreeing to this program now, with always the possibility of scrapping the program in the future and re-pursuing, getting back those materials, getting back what is necessary to pursue a program, even if it means doing it from scratch, rather than continuing to have their proxies possibly weathered down, continuing to have more Israeli airstrikes, and America coming back in to bomb the program while they're still under restrictive sanctions. So there's a lot of incentives. On the other hand, the hardliners, and I have to put the inverse here, might be of the belief that you get to that atomic weapon, you get 1, 2, 3, or 4 A bombs. The risk of one of those A bombs being thrown at an American military base, or the risk of one of those A bombs being used, is so immense that the United States at that point would treat us as they treat the North Koreans, as Donald Trump has gone to North Korea and had to do with diplomacy with them, even though the United States would very well rather either forget they exist or continue just to wait for the decrepit regime to collapse or whatever. So if they're of that mindset, it isn't, hope is unconquerable, as they say. And there is a difficulty of some regimes in being a little too optimistic. And the Iranian government, for the entirety of its creation of the Axis resistance to today, continues to be an incredibly optimistic power when it comes to its prospects of resistance against Israel and uprooting the Israeli state, or building enough of a network to be able to deter what is happening to them right now. I'm not into cinema and visual arts, but when it comes to poetry and novels, I'm not just a typical audience. Hashtag books, hashtag avid reader.